This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring Nate Shreffler, the offensive coordinator at Hillsdale College. Coach Shreffler recaps his collegiate coaching career and experience as a play caller. He also reflects on his selection as the AFCA Division II Assistant Coach of the Year. If you like this podcast, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new episodes each week. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Shreffler.
Coach, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Well, hey,
getting ready for spring ball. So
yeah,
same business.
It's hard not to be busy these days. It's always the next thing up, right?
Yep.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time to chat with us here a little bit, and let's just kind of dive in, man. Hillsdale is a extremely special place for you. Not only did you play there from '89 to '92. You were able to kind of come back around and basically spend the last, almost a quarter of a decade at Hillsdale. It's kind of crazy to hear, especially in this volatile coaching industry that we're in. What are some of the unique things that, it's like for you to coach there, especially probably seeing a ton of changes from the late 80s, early 90s to now, your stretch as a player all the way to OC.
Yeah, I think as a player, my first year here was the first year we had transitioned from NAIA to NCAA Division II. So, being on that end of it as a student athlete and being part of that transition was pretty special too. And a lot of success here at the school. Going back decades and decades, all the way back to Muddy Waters. But the head coach that I played for, Dick Lowry. Just had a tremendous run, in his time here. So I got to play for a really good head coach as a player. It was a special place, the bonds and the relationships that you built. It, was always kind of my big time. So, when I got into the coaching business, I always thought that if I could find my way back here at some point and be a coach here, that was kind of the goal. And I was able to do that really early in my career, and it's been home ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so honestly, as you got into the coaching profession, you did kind of mark that down as like, hey, this is something I'd love to do, is to get back there and coach in my alma mater. So that was something that you kind of set out to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a special place for me. And, I thought if there was anything I could do to, help the guys that go through the locker room have that same kind of experience, that, it meant a lot to me to be able to do something like that, and it still does.
That's awesome. Well, you got done playing for Hillside '92. Tell us about what was that epiphany that said, this is what I want to do. I want to coach. I want to be around this great game of football. What was that epiphany like, and how'd you go about getting your first gig?
Yeah, so my dad was a high school coach, so it kind of runs in my blood a little bit, and I've been around it since I was a little kid. And, once I got out of, when I graduated from here, I went into education. So I was a junior high teacher out in Phoenix, Arizona for a couple of years. And, the football out there at the junior high level was a little different. It wasn't tackle football. It was actually flag football. So I was the only coach. And, so I had to kind of organize things and do it that way. I was a science teacher. So, that part of it was a little different too. And, I really just, I think after the first 2 years out there doing that, I decided that, my passion was definitely more on the coaching end of things. And, had a high school buddy that got a part-time gig at, a small college down the road here, St. Joe's College, that doesn't exist anymore. But, my first thought was if he can coach college football, I'm pretty sure I can do it too.
Right.
So I, started the search and jumped in and was able to get a gig at Olivet College, which is a little Division III school just south of Lansing. And I lived in the dorm. So, I was a kind of a part-time coach. I actually coached track while I was there too.
Oh, wow.
And so I lived in the dorm, did that for 2 years, and then got my first full-time gig at the University of St. Francis down in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when they were starting up football. And that was quite an experience too, being on the ground floor, starting up a program. So I got into it for 3 years and then got the call from, one of my former coaches, our defense coordinator when I played was the head coach here at Hillsdale at about that time. And they had an opening, and gave me a call and took me about 2 seconds to say I'm coming. So, the rest is history.
Well, you just opened up a bunch of different doors there for me to have
Yeah.
some follow-up questions with. But I literally got a call yesterday from a guy that's coaching high school ball here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he wants to coach college. He wants to get the collegiate level, and he's asking for advice. I remember my first gig was a middle school football coach here in Waco, Texas, and then was able to move up to the high school, and then I wanted to coach college, and it was a challenge. What was that process like for you to get that job at Olivet? Like, who'd you reach out to? How did you get chose for that?
So I reached out to all the coaches that I had here at Hillsdale first off, and that was right before really the internet was kicking in too. So it's mid 90s. So you had to do everything by the old school snail mail. And, I asked for any suggestions from those guys, any connections that they might have had. And then I just flooded the market with letters. I just started sending out letters and tried to get into any part-time GA position, anything that was available, and just kind of, it wasn't immediate responses. I think,
if any, on some cases, right?
Yeah. So, as it went, one of my former coaches, Pat Reedman, had a connection with the guys at Olivet, and they had an opening. So, had that, phone conversation and made my way back here to the Midwest for a weekend, and was able to buzz up there and talk with them. It was, in the end of it, I don't know how many hundreds of letters I sent out and everything. That was the one opportunity that I got. And I jumped all over it. And I learned a lot that first year because, you go from coaching junior high ball that's not even contact football to, just the experience you had as a player to, now you got to really dig into it and you got to learn a lot of football. And, I've been fortunate. I've been an offensive line coach my entire time. So I've always kind of felt like I never stopped learning. Even though I've been here for a long time, I think it's, you can't get too stagnant. You got to figure out different ways to teach the same stuff and, be able to stay ahead of the curve that way. But, the process before it's, really the only recommendation I'd probably give to young coaches is that you got to be willing to take a chance. Yeah. And it may not seem like a big job at first. That was a part-time gig. I think I made $6,000, so I was getting $600 a month. Yeah. I got some room and board out of it, and but I dove into football. I mean, that's what it was all about at the time. And so,
yeah. Well, I appreciate you kind of sharing that because something I hope our listeners highlight, especially the young guys trying to break into the industry, is it can be 1,000 no's or 1,000 no responses. All you need is just that one yes. It's just that one
absolutely.
Yes, and that kind of gets the snowball rolling. And then the second thing you kind of mentioned was that University of St. Francis gig where you guys are starting from the ground up. What made you, go after that job? I know sometimes in this business you just kind of got to get what you can get. But what made you go after that job, and what were some of the unique experiences of building a program?
Yeah, so going into my second year, they had announced that they were going to start that program down there. And Coach Kevin Donnelly is still the head coach there, and he was announced. Now his first hire was one of my high school buddies. And, so they were obviously building a staff, and he put a plug in from the offensive line position for me. And I went down and interviewed and, was fortunate enough to get hired there. And the year and a half, I guess I was there, the recruiting was pretty crazy, because it was new and it was fresh. We didn't even have our offices were this old abandoned house that was right on the corner of the campus. And we were all crammed into one room and just hit the ground running. It was myself and Dan Piper, who's now the head coach at Cornell College out in Iowa, and Warren Maloney. We're kind of the three amigos that just got after it. And, Coach Donnelly did all the fundraising and was able to get a stadium in. The field was not really intact, but the stands were that first year. I don't know if I've ever seen a worse football field in terms of, because they had drainage tiles and everything put in that never really had time to settle. So there were areas around the goal lines that were like quicksand. So that stuff, those hurdles that you had to overcome, and they got a heck of a facility down there now. So and they've won some national titles at the NAIA level.
Right.
And, being kind of one of those grandfathers that helped start the whole thing, I do check on their scores every week, and do have some connections down there still too. So, but yeah, that was really it was a high school buddy, and I got a foot in the door that way, and jumped on it. First full-time. Yeah, it was first full-time job was doing that.
That's amazing. Now, you said something else I found pretty interesting. You talked about being an O-line coach pretty much your whole career. Obviously, you're OC. I'm assuming you still hold offensive line duties, right?
Yep.
And just the uniqueness of being at one place for a long time. I would imagine for some folks it'd be easy just to get to the end of the season, the end of the recruiting cycle, the end of spring ball, and always when it comes back around next year, you just run it back. You just kind of do it like you've always done it. How do you stay sharp and just evolve with how NCAA rules are evolving, with how kids are evolving, technology? How do you keep yourself sharp over all these years?
Yeah, well, I tell you, with the stuff that you can do online these days, it's actually a lot easier in some ways. The things that have changed, the recruiting and stuff is so much more accelerated than it was even 10 years ago. So you really have to stay on top of that too, because kids are wanting to make decisions, and those early offers do matter now. Whereas before, we would really wait until the season was over with, and it was November by the time you'd really dive into that recruiting class, getting visits and stuff. So that stuff is all sped up, and so you really do have to be hustling. This time of year, the recruiting never stops. There's kind of slow times of the year with that, but I try to stay up with as much as I can. Really just watching how other guys do it. And, from the coaching standpoint, just figuring out different ways to do the same stuff and try to connect with guys differently. The one thing with kids these days, they're all a lot more tech savvy than I'll ever think I'll ever be.
Right.
But, I think you have to find different ways to teach, different learning styles and that sort of stuff. So it's always important, I think, to stay sharp and have different ways to do stuff so you can connect with more kids.
Absolutely. Now I'm gonna brag on you here a little bit. First in offensive efficiency and passing, second leading rusher in the conference. You've coached tons of players that kind of just recreated again the record books over there at Hillsdale. And I know you're not a young guy right now at this point in your career, but impart some knowledge, maybe some lumps that you took as an offensive coordinator, maybe transition, maybe learning the pass game that you can maybe pass off to some young coaches that can help them maybe avoid the lumps that you kind of went through in your career as you developed into this, really good offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think probably the one thing that, this is always a constant battle is always wanting to do too much.
Yeah.
It's trying to find a few things that you can get really good at and, kind of, to set your focus on those things. There's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, it's, we fight it every year when you go to clinics and you see things that look like it'd be something you'd want to do, but then how does it fit? And that's, how much can the kids learn and be able to process and execute? So, I think early on, that's the one thing that, we had to do is we had to remove some things. It was more, less is more kind of mentality. Yeah. And that's what I would say to probably anybody that's kind of young and getting into it is, find something to hang your hat on and get good at it.
Right. Well, that's great advice. And then I just kind of touch on the other thing that I hear from a lot of young coaches that, they feel like they're not ready to OC or DC or anything like that because I'm a DB coach and I don't know the front seven. I'm a running backs coach. I don't know the pass game. You spent time as an offensive line guy your whole career. Well, how did you intentionally go out and learn pass games, concepts, and just stuff that you really like?
Yeah. So the way we kind of do it here, I'd probably say I'm more of the run game coordinator. Okay. So our quarterback coach really takes care of a lot of that stuff. It's not that I don't know it, but that's not my primary focus. So, if you're on a staff that, you can do that kind of stuff and be able to divvy up responsibilities. And, we've always kind of done it as a collective, between the head coach and myself and our quarterbacks coach, when we formulate our game plans based off of, what we're all seeing. And to be able to do it that way, I think for me especially, is, made it a little bit less stressful in terms of not having to learn, the intricate details of the passing game.
Right.
So, that part, and I do think, coaching the offensive line is a little bit different animal too when you get into that, because you got 5 or 6 guys that you have to worry about. And, you really got to focus on a lot of the minor details that, allow you to be successful up front too. So, that's my primary focus is the O-line and the run game stuff.
I got you. Okay. Well, I wanted to transition here a little bit. Now, I was doing some reading. Hopefully this still exists. Otherwise, it's going to be a moot question here. But the Victory Day program, basically your local children with special needs kind of get a game day experience. Talk to us a little bit about that, kind of what that's meant to you and your involvement with it.
Yeah, so our head coach, Keith Otterbein, one of the things that, he harps on this, and it resonated with me a long time ago, but, he talks about your pool of influence and, using whatever platform you have to change the world for good. And he does an outstanding job of creating, opportunities, not just for the coaching staff, but also for our players to get involved. It's one of those things that you can talk about it, but to go out and do stuff. So he's really facilitated a lot of that and has allowed us to be a part of it. And so with the Victory Day, it's really the full game experience. We have a meal. We have I think on any given year, we'll have about 20 families that will bring, their special needs person in, and we do a team dinner. We have it catered in here at the sports complex. The cheerleaders get involved. We have an announcer, our PA announcer for the game day. And we have a bunch of stuff set up around the field. So, we have our players that are involved. I kind of run the offense. We have a kind of a segment of it where we're running plays with our guests as the ball carriers and the announcers calling it out over the loudspeaker, and we're scoring touchdowns and getting rowdy and getting fired up. And it really is a great experience to get those folks, involved, but also to get our kids involved in making that day special for everybody.
Well, that's awesome, man. I in this profession, it's so easy to get caught up in so much of the other stuff. Worried about getting hired or fired the next gig, or why can't we convert on 3rd and 1? All the stuff. But sometimes it's pretty cool to let other people that really view our game as a game enjoy it, man. And so that's awesome you guys do that. And last thing here before I let you go, you were voted as the assistant D2 assistant coach of the year. What did that mean to you? Not just to receive the award. And, I know the players and the coaches and all that kind of stuff. They're a big part of that. But I mean, these are other coaches on different sidelines that respect what you do, respect what you do on and off the field, respect the person that you are. Yeah. What does that kind of award mean to you?
I tell you, it was a pleasant surprise. I mean, it really was. I'm not gonna lie. As an offensive line, as a player, and being an offensive line coach for as long as I have, most of the time, anytime anybody recognizes you, it's usually for something bad.
That's right.
So in getting this award, you don't do any of the stuff that we do looking for awards, but to get a pat on the back like this, it does mean a lot. And I do think that the getting highlighted on something like this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Coach Otterbein and that pool of influence. And if highlighting, guys that do stuff, like we do here, and the extra stuff off the field, and the opportunities that we create to get our kids involved with different organizations and taking part in it ourselves, if that helps motivate or nudge somebody in the direction of doing something extra for their communities, then I think that's what it's all about. I think the award was great, but like I said, if it is helping to get somebody else off the couch and to go do something in their communities, then to me that means more to me than anything else. If it helps motivate somebody else to go do something similar. Amen.
Well, Coach, we appreciate what you do, not only for this great profession, but what you do for us, and been just a great steward of our game and representing us so well. We strongly appreciate you. Before we let you go, I'd love for you to share any social media handles that you might have, Twitter, so guys can keep up with your journey.
Yeah, so Twitter, I'm not a huge Twitter guy, but I do have it for the recruiting stuff, but it's @Coach Shreff. And Shreffler. It's been a privilege to be here as long as I've been here and coaching the kids that we get to coach. And, it's a special place and looking forward to many more years to come.
Amen, Coach. Well, we appreciate you. We'll make sure to link that Twitter account in the show notes. And best of luck to you guys in spring ball and finishing up recruiting and everything else that you have this spring. All right?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, Coach.
Yep, you too.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Inside the Headset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit afcainsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter at Coach Mario Price. And remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.